Okay, Abel Garr was the grandfather of Phyllis May Garr. Now, he was one of the four that were part of the express team of the rescuers group. The other three was Cyrus Hubbard Willock. He was the leader. He was also the author of the hymn, Ye Elders of Israel. Joseph Angel Young, who was the son of Brigham Young, and Stephen Wells Taylor. And you'll find later we'll talk about what he did after Abel Garr was used to come back. The Garr boys took turns staying in Salt Lake City with their sisters. Rodney Badger had been passed away, and so his sister was a widow. And because Abel was taking his turn in the fall of 1856, it appears this may be one reason that Abel went out on the rescue with the first group of men called by Brigham Young. It's reported that the blessings given these men by Brigham Young prior to leaving fairly made them quake. By October 7th, George D. Grant and William Kimball led the first rescue group of a half-dozen wagons loaded to overflowing with goods. They made good time and reached Fort Bridger on October 13th. There they cached flour and other goods with the Mormons who owned the fort, thereby saving some of the provisions for the last leg of the return journey. Soon afterward, they left Fort Bridger, braving the severe storms of the high plains. After a few more days of exhausting struggle, Joseph Young split the party and sent a wagon and a few men in advance to locate the handcart companies and notify them that a rescue effort was in progress. Young, Kimball, Grant, Abel Garr, and Cyrus Willock pushed on ahead with a wagon and a few mounts. But on October 19th, even the rescuers were forced to stop and wait out a raging blizzard. The next day, James Willie and Joseph Elder wandered into the camp after a heroic march. Contact had finally been made with the handcart company. Within minutes, the camp was struck, and the men hastened through the storm to find the starving and freezing members of the Willie Company. 9 people in the company had been left dead that morning, and dozens more were freezing. The only food remaining was 2 days' rations of crackers. Soon fires were burning, and potatoes and beef were cooking in soup pots. Blankets, buffalo robes, clothing were distributed. Chestnut recorded the immediate effect the rescue had on the miserable travelers. That evening, for the very first time in quite a period, the songs of Zion were to be heard in the camp, and peals of laughter. The change seemed almost miraculous, so sudden was it from grave to gay, from sorrow to gladness. William Kimball stayed with some provisions to nurse the Willie Company on toward Utah. George Grant and the others left through deepening snow to find the Martin Company believed to be at Devil's Gate. Another week passed before Grant was forced to stop. His rescue party had passed Devil's Gate and was several days beyond the point where they expected to find the Martin Company. Grant sent Young, Garr, and Daniel W. Jones ahead with saddle horses and packed mules to make one final effort to locate Martin. 2 days later, October 28th, they located the Martin and Hodgett companies, both stranded for days in the snow. The Willie Company had been in a bad enough condition, but now finding the Martin Company, Young and the others could find no words to describe the awful sight. 56 people had already been lost. At first, no one seemed to realize that rescue was at hand. Young had no food, only good news for the freezing travelers. The only thing left to do was to get the company moving again, which would be no easy task. Jones and Garr left the Martin Company to find the Hunt Wagon Trail 2 days east. After finding and getting the Hunt Company moving, they returned and helped lead the handcarts, struggling up Avenue Hill toward the Sweetwater River. Jones captured the scene in his own words. A condition of distress here met my eyes I have never seen before or since. There were old men pulling and tugging their carts, sometimes loaded with a sick wife or children, women pulling along sick husbands, little children 6 to 8 years old struggling through the mud and snow. As night came on, the mud would freeze on their clothes and feet. There were 2 of us and hundreds needing help. What could we do? Far away in the Salt Lake Valley, Brigham Young had wasted no time gathering and organizing a much greater effort. Some 250 wagons loaded with goods had already departed. The company slowly struggled westward, would soon meet the eastward bound relief wagons, but not before still more died on the way. At Willow Creek, the Willie Company lost 15 people in one night. On November 2nd, the Willie Company survivors entered the valley exhausted but safe at last. The company had lost 62 members. The Martin Company would arrive in broken groups through the end of November with 130 to 150 fewer people than had started back in July. Many survivors would bear the scars of amputated feet, fingers, and toes. Stories of individuals' efforts to help rescue the handcart travelers would be told and retold for generations. Here's one account. Then, in the depth of her despair, she, Elizabeth Horrocks, records, "I will be readily perceived that under such adverse circumstances I had become despondent. I was 6,000 or 7,000 miles from my native land, in a wild Rocky Mountain country, in a destitute condition, the ground covered with snow, the waters covered with ice, and I, with 3 fatherless children, with scarcely anything to protect them from the merciless storms. When I retired to bed that night, being the 27th of October, I had a stunning revelation. In my dream, my husband stood by me and said, 'Cheer up, Elizabeth, deliverance is at hand.' The dream was fulfilled the very next day, October 28th, when Joseph A. Young, Daniel Jones, and Abel Garr galloped unexpectedly into camp amid tears and cheers and smiles and laughter of the immigrants. The rescue party sent from Salt Lake began to arrive, and none too soon, Elizabeth and her children arrived in Salt Lake City on November 30th, 1856. Within a year from the time of this hardship and rescue that Abel Garr was involved with, he at the time he was unbaptized, and within a year he was baptized by the leaders of that rescue group. And a story that I think is well worth reading.